Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. At least this morning where I am right now. Welcome to the Medlock Post radio show. And this is your host, Richard G. Medlock. This is where we educate, entertain, enlighten, and empower. Today is July 22nd, 2022, and today's episode is the 19th principle. Yes, the 19th principle contained in the Constitution of the United States. The views and opinions on the Medlock Post radio show are the views and opinions of the host. They are not necessarily the views or opinions of Spreaker.com, its corporations, affiliates, or any other podcast streaming services. And yes, that's who we are. And today is July 22nd. It's my older brother's birthday, although he is deceased. But my brother Ray, I always like to honor him. There were only the two of us. I was the youngest. And he was always my protector up until a certain age when I got bigger than him. And I became his protector because he stopped growing and I got bigger, and I played sports and he didn't, and so I became his protector. We had a great relationship throughout our lives, and I love him for it. Now, America is still standing. I want you to know that. We'll continue to stand because of we the people, not because of our government, not because of Joe Biden, not because of the globalists, but America is still standing, and we're going to keep fighting to keep it standing. And that's what a lot of this show is about, the messages here, to give you valuable information and educate you on what you need to use to fight for the Constitution and for America. Here's our first quote of today. It's from Mark Twain. I love Mark Twain. Quote, "When the mob and the press and the whole world tell you to move, your job is to plant yourself like a tree beside the river of truth and tell the whole world, no, you move." Unquote. That's what we the people need to be doing, is planting ourselves like a tree beside the river of truth and stand there and tell everybody else, no, you need to move to the truth. None of this wokeness, none of these lies that we're being told by the, like he says, the mob, the press, and the whole world. Now, remember when these quotes were written, way back when. And these things were going on then as well as now. They just have increased because of the internet. I love P.J. O'Rourke. If you haven't read his stuff or followed him, you might want to look into that. He says, quote, "At the core of liberalism is the spoiled child, miserable as all spoiled children are, unsatisfied, demanding, ill-disciplined, despotic, and useless. Liberalism is a philosophy of sniveling brats." Unquote. I love that quote. It describes AOC and Omar Ilhan and the other 17 ladies that went out and protested the other day and faked, ladies and gentlemen, getting arrested. Faked getting arrested. Faked having handcuffs on themselves. I saw two memes about AOC, and one was she was sitting there in her white pants and white shirt. She was sitting there leaned forward, her elbow on her leg, her head in her hand, and a psychologist was sitting there and says, "Now, Alexandria, are the handcuffs in the room now?" I'm cracking up. That is so funny. And the next one was a picture of her sitting in the air, and it says, "Here's AOC sitting in an invisible police car waiting to be taken to an invisible jail." These are great, folks. These are spoiled children. As P.J. O'Rourke says, liberalism is a philosophy of sniveling brats. Well, AOC and her compadres out there, or is it compadreettes, we're out there acting like sniveling brats. So that's what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with logic or common sense. We're not. When we're talking about liberalism, globalism, democratic socialist, anything on the left, there's no common sense. Now, here's a few things, a little statistics you might. Who wrote this the other day? I got this off of Twitter. Yes, I'm still on Twitter. It might not be for long if this depends on what happens with Musk and Twitter and all that stuff. That was a whole fiasco from the start. Don't get me on that one. No, I can't remember who. It was one of the Republicans or conservatives. Not a. This is a writer. 65% of Americans are spending more to go out with their family. 61% are driving less, or trying to. We try to watch our trips and our family. 50% are traveling less. That means air, bus, train, etc. 40% are using savings to pay for day-to-day expenses. We talked about this earlier under our show Capitalism and Freedom. We talked about how expenses are being drawn down just to live. And then he says, Joe Biden's America is failing. Well, folks, let me rephrase that. This is not Joe Biden's America. This is we the people's America. It is our America. It doesn't belong to Joe Biden. He's not a king. He's trying to be a dictator, a totalitarian tyrannist. It is not his America. It is we the people's America. Remember Joe Biden campaigning says, "I don't work for you." Yes, you do, Joe. Apparently, 81 million people voted for you, and you are going against their wishes. Most of them. That's why people are leaving the Democrat Party. They're turning their backs on all of this because it's killing them. All right. So we the people. This is America's we the people. So this is how we go after them, folks. We just tell them straight to their face. We plant ourselves like a tree beside the river of truth. And it sounds like it's time to go on a break, and we'll be right back after these messages. We are back after those messages. We got to make money somehow, folks. All right, we're back. We want to start talking about the 19th principle. The 19th principle, this is going to be interesting to you folks. And it says this, and it's been discussed, and of course right now it's being thrown out the window by those in power in Washington. And when I say power, I'm talking about the Republicans too, because more and more of them are turning into socialists. The 19th principle: only limited and carefully defined powers should be delegated to government, all others being retained in the people. Now, it did not say federal government. It did not say state government. It said to government, whether it's federal or state or city or county. It is a limited, defined power. And that's what the Constitution did. And that's what most states' constitutions do. It limits this power. So let's talk about this today. And one of the things that has been abused, greatly abused, like some of these other things. You've heard me talk about the year 1913. Folks, that was a bad year for America. We're still paying for the decisions that were made in 1913 by Congress and even the states. We're paying the consequences, and they're not good. One of them was the Federal Reserve System was created in 1913. We talked about that the other day under central banks and freedom. Now this is episode 26. I think that was episode 24. Because 25 I did just some definitions of some bills and some news that's going on. The other thing that happened that year was the 16th Amendment, which ended up creating the Internal Revenue Service, a power base of corruption and abuse. Now what? I'll probably get a notice for an audit in the next few days. That's fine. I've been audited before. Come at me. The other thing that happened in 1913, the 17th Amendment was passed. But let's go back and refresh your memories on the 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. See, there again, the United States, you're limited. You have defined powers. The states, you have defined powers. Everything else is left up to the people. Now, the people felt that the hedging up of federal authority was absolutely essential because of their experience with corrupt and abusive governments in the past, i.e. the United Kingdom, France, Italy, Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, on and on. Remember, the Founding Fathers studied history. They understood it. They went back to Cicero. Cicero was a good friend of Julius Caesar. He's the one that pushed natural law and also pushed for a three-tiered government, 3 branches of government. Montesquieu implemented it. He was the first one to implement it. The United States implemented it. But Alexander Hamilton in Federalist number 15 and Senator Hirono from Democrat Hawaii, has not read the Federalist Papers or the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, or she wouldn't say, how the heck are we supposed to know what the Founding Fathers meant by all this? What was their intent? Their intent was for a free country to take place and stay free. That was their intent. All right, Alexander Hamilton, Federalist number 15. Quote, "There is, in the nature of sovereign power, an impatience of control that disposes those who are invested with the exercise of it to look with an evil eye upon all external attempts to restrain or direct its operations. This tendency is not difficult to be accounted for. It has its origins in the love of power. Power controlled or abridged is almost always the rival and enemy of that power by which it is controlled or abridged. This simple proposition will teach us how little reason there is to expect that the persons entrusted with the administration of the affairs of the particular members of the Confederacy, that's the federal government, will at all times be ready with perfect good humor and an unbiased regard to the public will to execute the resolutions or decrees of the general authority. The reverse of this expectation results from the constitution of men." Unquote. So he's telling us in the Federalist number 15 that men in power will become corrupted. And we need to control that. We've lost control of that, folks. We've lost control of the people in power. They're in control. They're doing what they want to do. All right, moving on with the 19th principle. The original balance between federal and state and federal government and states is the separation of powers between the states and the federal government. And that was designed to reinforce the principle of limited government. See, this is your first check and balance between the states and the federal government. That's a check and balance. Well, how was that going to take place? How were the states going to check and balance what the federal government's going to do? Well, it's spelled out in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 3. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislature thereof for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. Thereby, this is going back, the article I read, the guy wants the equal number of senators per population like the House. Apparently he hasn't read the Constitution either. So the senators were appointed or elected by the state legislature. Now what were they supposed to do? Let me read Alexander Hamilton, and this is on his essay of Freedom and Power. "This balance between the national and state government ought to be dwelt on with particular attention, as it is the most important. It forms a double security to the people. If one encroaches on their rights, they will find a powerful protection in the other. Indeed, they will both be prevented from overpassing their constitutional limits by certain rivalship which will ever subsist between them." So you see, the Founding Fathers set up in Article 1, Section 3, this balance, this check and balance between the state and the federal government, so that the states had a way to protect themselves. 2 senators appointed by the state legislature. Where power rivals power. Alright, that sounds ominous, doesn't it? The founders felt that by having a wholesome balance between the federal and state governments, the people would have recourse to one or the other in case of usurpation or abuse by either. Hamilton further stated in Federalist Papers number 28, power being almost always the rival of power, the general government will at all times stand ready to check the usurpations of the state governments, and these will have the same disposition towards the general government. The people, by throwing themselves into either scale, will infallibly make it preponderant. If their rights are invaded by either, they can make use of the other as the instrument of redress. Unquote. Power being almost always the rival of power. So again, here's this check and this balance. And as we look more at what happened to that power, and it sounds like it's time for another break, and so we will go to that break, and you get to listen to some messages or do whatever you want to between now and I come back. But I'll be back. We'll see you in a few. And we have returned. This is the Medlock Post radio show, and I'm your host, Richard G. Medlock. We are back. All right. What happened between the balance and checks of the federal government and the state? What happened to the state's power or rights to put a check on the federal government? They sent their 2 senators to Washington. Now, the founders, I'm telling you, they're frowning at the 17th Amendment. Yes, from 1913, the 17th Amendment. But would the states be able to protect themselves from the might of the federal government if the Congress began legislating against states' rights? Originally, the states could protect themselves because the U.S. senators were appointed by the state legislatures, and the Senate could veto any legislation by the House of Representatives which they considered a threat to the rights of the individual states. There's your check and balance. The senators get a bill from the House, and they can sit there and say, wait a minute, this will adversely affect what happens in our states. We're not going to pass it. Boom, this is dead. Unfortunately, the protection of states' rights by this means was completely wiped out by the passage of the 17th Amendment in 1913. It was co-sponsored by Senator Joseph Bristow, Kansas, and Senator William Borah, B-O-R-A-H, of Idaho. This was adopted during the progressive era of Democratic policies. This is when Woodrow Wilson was starting to come into power. This is when his right-hand man, the Marxist, was wielding his Marxist sword to get things done. He wanted a central bank. He got it. He wanted taxation. He got it. He wanted states to lose their rights because that's part of Marxism. He got it. Marxism was winning in 1913, and our Congress was too stupid to see it. They thought this is great. Oh, the senators are sitting there. Wow, this gives us more power. We're going to be elected by the people. All right, so the amendment provided that senators would thenceforth be elected by popular ballot rather than appointed by state legislatures. This meant the states as sovereign commonwealths had lost their representation at the federal level, and their senators would be subject to the same popular pressures during an election campaign as those who confront the members of the House of Representatives. Folks, we have seen what has happened. And I've pushed for years and years and years, and so have other people, to repeal the 17th Amendment. If we were to have a convention of states, which is still a viable situation here, folks, it's still a viable situation, and it's legal. Two things need to be on the table, a minimum of two things. Repeal the 17th Amendment. Let's make it three. Repeal the 16th Amendment, and term limits. Those are the three things that should be done in a convention of states. I'm trying to get in touch with a gentleman through my cousin, who is one of the big proponents of convention of states, and try to get him on the program. We finally got all those technical issues worked out to start to have guests on the program. All right, so since the 17th Amendment, there has been no veto power which the states could exercise against the Congress in the cases where a federal statute was deemed in violation of states' rights. Now, folks, this was going on long before 1913. This was going on in the 1830s and 40s and 50s, and it led up to the Civil War. This was one of the main reasons we fought each other in the 1860s in a Civil War. It wasn't all about slavery. It was about states' rights. The senators who used to be beholden to the state legislature are now beholden to lobbyists, to money, to other influences. Some of them even blackmail because of their lifestyles. So all of a sudden, all these negotiations started in Congress. Who's going to get money and where is it going? We've watched this go down this ugly road since 1913. It started out kind of innocent, but it didn't take long for it to get ugly, folks. It really didn't. Now, maybe sometime in the not too distant future, the people may want to take another look at the present trend and consider the advantages of returning to the founders' policy of having state legislatures in the United States Senate. The 19th principle: balance of power. We need some more people like a Daniel Webster. These were all senators. John C. Calhoun and Henry Clay. John C. Calhoun was Andrew Jackson's vice president, and he resigned. He was the first vice president to resign because of the conflict about states' rights. This history goes back. It didn't just start in 1913. On the Statue of Liberty, it reads, quote, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free," unquote. Folks, we're yearning to breathe free in America today. These freedoms are being taken away from us, and we the people need to stand up and speak up and do something about it. And sounds like it's another break time. We will be right back. All right, you have returned to the Medlock Post radio show, and this is your host, Richard G. Medlock, sitting here in the Medlock Post studios. The 19th principle is an important principle, has been an important principle. And yes, you can turn the music off, thank you. I want to talk about vision, not the vision we see with our eyes, but the vision that we have in our minds and in our hearts as we look into our future as a person, as a family, as a nation, as a business. Vision. You've heard of people who said that, oh, they're a visionary. Well, let me tell you a little story. I've used this in my training classes throughout the years. In the 1300s at Cambridge University in England, a chapel was constructed for one of the colleges. The vaulted roof was supported by huge beams fashioned from old growth oak trees. Well, 700 years later, the beams had so deteriorated that the roof was in danger of collapsing. The building required extensive renovation, including replacing the beams. But where, now, 700 years later, could those repairing the building find giant oak trees of such an age and quality as had been available to the original builders? Well, the answer lay right outside the chapel door. The original builders of the chapel had known that at some point in the future the structure would need new oak beams, so they had planted acorns in the churchyard. Over the centuries, a grove of oak trees had grown to full maturity. There were the materials, the resources to repair the chapel. That's vision. The vision of those chapel builders to ensure the survival of the chapel. It extended hundreds of years to full maturity. So how do you define vision? Well, let's define it as this. Vision is a picture of future success. Vision is a picture of future success. This is what we need to be teaching in our schools. We need to teach the essence of vision. This is what the founding fathers were doing by writing the Constitution of the United States. They were setting up a constitution to protect freedom, to provide a structure to protect freedom, so that down the road, if freedom started to be taken away, we the people had the means to protect our freedoms. So a vision forms when we think far enough ahead to realize there will be more important challenges than we can prepare for now. Perhaps by doing something as simple as planting a few acorns. This is why the Founding Fathers stressed education, religion, and morality. Because they knew if those three things maintained their course, the Constitution would stay on course itself. That's what we're looking at, folks. That was the vision of our Founding Fathers. That's been the vision of many a people in America. That's been the vision of inventors, creators, individual people creating, using their talents to create something that would benefit their life and maybe the lives of others. The free enterprise system. To try to fail, to sail, to succeed. This is what we're talking about. It's simple. It's a simple process, folks. This is not being taught. Schools are teaching our youth that America's bad, that there's no hope, your rights are being squashed because you can't have an abortion, and they can't see beyond the sign in front of them. That's being held up in front. They can't see beyond that. They have no vision. They don't know how to have a vision. Many of we the people still do. We see a vision of America still standing, and continuing to stand in the future. We see a vision of our government getting turned around eventually. We see that. And we the people will be the arbiters of that to happen, not our elected officials. They're too power hungry. Let me go back and read the quote I read in episode 15 by John Locke, who was one of the people, the philosophers, because he was a philosopher of freedom, and he projected a vision, and he's one of those that the Founding Fathers studied and understood. And he said this, quote, "Whenever legislators endeavor to take away and destroy the property of the people," and we can define property as freedom, right? "Or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power," arbitrary means they take power into their own hands, "they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience," unquote. When a CEO of a corporation goes beyond his means, if he takes money, if he embezzles money, if he gives bad orders, if he fires good people, if he's just making things bad for the company, what do? They get rid of him. Same thing here with those in power in the government. They need to be elected out of office. That's how we do this. But I think we can safely say that our government, the Biden administration, although he's just a figurehead, is at war with America, at war with we the people, at war with the Constitution, at war with freedom. Everything they're doing is to take these freedoms away. And I'm going to keep repeating this because the Democratic Socialists are in a hurry to get their agenda in place before the November election. And it started right after Biden was elected. They had lost 4 years when Hillary Clinton lost. Obama really pushed this thing. The Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, they didn't know what was in it. They didn't care what was in it. but it was a government structure to control 20% of the American economy, to control medicine and insurance companies. Once they had that structure in place, they could do whatever they wanted to with it, and they've pretty much done that. All right, here's the last couple of episodes. I talked about this chip maker bill, this chip maker subsidy bill for the Intel industry. So the last two episodes I talked about it. This thing keeps growing like crazy. First it was a $52 billion, and then the next day when I said it was a $54 billion subsidy, and then the same day it went up to $130 billion. Now, as of yesterday, the bill is up to $250 billion in less than a week. And you had 14 GOP socialists vote to take this bill out of committee to put it on the floor for a general vote. I hadn't gone there yet. I'm not sure if it's going there today or Monday or whatever, but they keep adding to it even after they brought it out of the procedural vote on the floor. Basically, that's the vote to take it out of the word just left me. Debate. That's not the word, but it'd come to me. Filibuster. See, I told you it'd come to me. Take it out of filibuster. They don't filibuster anymore. They just vote. This is corporate welfare beyond crazy. Again, it's the government taking over another industry. Joe Biden, from reports out last night and this morning, is getting ready to issue a bunch of executive orders to regulate more and move to shutting down fossil fuels in the United States. This climate agenda is out of control. It is nothing but a farce to gain control of the people and your money. It is out of hand. This is the war that we are fighting as we the people against this out of control socialist government. This is what we're fighting here. And it's ugly. And they're doing other things. Just McConnell and Schumer came up with another bill, a bipartisan bill, to ban assault weapons. Folks, a fork can be an assault weapon. A rock. Cain proved that. A rock can be an assault weapon. An automobile. Or a piece of rope. They want our guns. And because they were 4 years behind, they're trying to push everything as fast as they can to get socialism in place, total control of America and your life and my life. I mean, Joe Biden said yesterday or the day before, we have to keep gasoline prices above $5 a gallon to force the people to buy electric vehicles. Force the people. That's not freedom, folks. That is not freedom. And my freedom is just being taken away for a couple of minutes because it's time to go to another break. So hold on, we'll be right back. And we have returned. This is the Medlock Post, and I'm your host, Richard G. Medlock. they're still looking for ways to override Roe versus Wade, the decision to disband it. They're looking for every way they can to make it legal again. This is who we're dealing with. Now, Congressman Jeffrey Duncan issued a statement yesterday. He's from South Carolina. He's not my district, but he's right next door. And this guy is working hard in Congress for we the people. He puts we the people first. He puts the Constitution first. And I'm trying to get him on the program to have a nice conversation with him. So we're starting to reach out. It's going to take a while to get these things lined up, but it's going to happen. Congressman Duncan wrote yesterday, this is on his Facebook page, quote, "Last month, the Supreme Court rightly struck down Roe v. Wade for utilizing bad constitutional theory to attempt to create a constitutional right to an abortion that didn't exist. Democrats this week tried to bypass the court by putting a statute into law that could potentially reinstate Roe through other means, this time through the guise of protecting access to contraception." Okay, they're desperate. Continuing, Democrats wrote their bill in haste and in the process did a sloppy job with their definitions. In fact, they've been scrambling to amend the bill all week as many Republicans have pointed out its numerous flaws. As written, the bill would likely allow companies to avoid the FDA process completely in regards to contraception, putting the health and safety of women at risk. See, they don't care about you and I. They care about power. Continuing, also, drugs which cause abortions could also slip in under these definitions, making this a backdoor national law to allow abortions, undercutting pro-life initiatives taking place on the state level throughout the country. Do you get the picture? Rule of law versus ruler's law. Continuing, additionally, they overrode existing religious conscience protections in federal law mandating that healthcare workers give out these drugs even if they have objections to their use, i.e. the Catholics. This is a clear violation of our First Amendment freedoms and one of the many reasons that the vast majority of House Republicans opposed this terrible bill. Furthermore, Democrats also put into this bill that state governments and federal agencies wouldn't be able to limit funding the organizations like Planned Parenthood who provide these bills. Period. Now he's got another paragraph, but they're putting in this bill that the states and the federal government, even themselves, are limited to what they can do. Yeah, they want Planned Parenthood funded to the hilt because a lot of that money is sent back to the Democratic Socialist to fund campaigns and other things. See, do you see the limitations just in what he's talking about here? Continuing with Congressman Duncan. Many of us in the pro-life community have been working for decades to overturn Roe v. Wade and restore the right to life. The ink isn't even dry on Dobbs, and Democrats, along with a handful of misguided Republicans, are already trying to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory by undermining what the court did with the shoddy, ill-conceived leftist bills. You can't call yourself pro-life and turn around and vote for nonsense like this. Amen. Amen was me. Back to Congressman Duncan. This bill wasn't about contraception. It was about federalizing abortion. This was an easy no vote for me to cast, and I trust it will be for our pro-life Republican senators as well, unquote. Well, folks, it's interesting. We have 14 to 16 GOP socialists, and some of them will vote for this because they're going to do it because, well, Trump's against Roe versus Wade. He rejoiced in the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So they'll vote for this. Do you see what's happening? There's no common sense and logic in Washington, D.C., except by a handful of people. It is amazing what's going on. It looks like we're close to the end of the program today. Thank you for being here. Again, my email is medlockpost@gmail.com. All right. Milan Kundera. He is originally from Czechoslovakia. He escaped, went to France. He's still alive today. He's like 93 years old. He's a writer. He's written some great things. And Czechoslovakia took away his citizenship many years ago, and he is a French citizen. He said this, because he's lived there, he's been there. Quote, "The first steps in liquidating a people is to erase its memory, destroy its books, its culture, its history. Then have somebody write new books, manufacture a new culture, invent a new history. Before long, the nation will begin to forget what it is and what it was." Unquote. And we have been watching that in America for the last 50 years. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it, folks, for our show today. The Medlock Post for today is through. May God bless America. Enjoy your day.